Alan, welcome. And I'd like to thank you for making the time to come in and share your story with us. So let's start with the workplace incident that resulted in your injuries. What exactly happened to you?
Well, the first incident happened in December 2011. I was working at the Hampton Inn in Ottawa, and I was electrocuted through the top of the head with 240 volts and thrown off a ladder and landed on my head on the concrete. So that resulted in a traumatic brain injury and multiple other injuries. It was a really bad experience, and I was unconscious for I don't know exactly how long, but there was one witness there that saw everything, and all I remember is waking up at some point, and there was a tremendous amount of pain inside my head, and I just remember holding my head going, oh my God, and just yelling. And I remember turning my body and trying to find some escape from this pain inside my head. I was pressing my face right into the concrete floor, just trying to escape it. And then after, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 minutes or whatever, the pain started to subside inside my head, and then immediately the brain, the focus became on my other injuries, which was my back and my elbows and so forth. And I remember distinctly, feeling the back of my head, and there was just this massive trauma, massive bump on my head, was about, I remember, it was about the size of my hand. And later I would take pictures of that, just amazed at the amount of swelling that could happen in just a short period of time. And anyway, at some point in time, my coworker, who apparently was trying to wake me up for some time, decided he was going to go fetch the supervisor or the manager or whatever. And a few minutes passed by, and then the supervisor showed up. Jean-Louis Grollo, his name, and he starts yelling at me. I'm lying there, just having experienced a brain injury that could have easily killed me, and all of a sudden your supervisor's looking down at you and yelling at you, I told you not to do this. What were you doing up there? And yelling at me, and I'm lying there helpless, not knowing where I am almost, it's just in another world. And I just remember staring at him, thinking, you disgusting person, you put me in this situation and now you're yelling at me. But I could get to that a little later, about how that came about and so forth. But that's my recollection of that first incident.
So Alan, are you a licensed electrician? Can you tell me exactly what threw you to the ground, concrete, and caused these injuries? Can you just give us some
No, I'm not an electrician. I was a maintenance person with quite a bit of experience in doing Mr. Fix-It type of work and renovations and so forth. So I'd had experience doing electrical work and plumbing and whatever else is required of a maintenance person. But being not licensed and not an expert in electrical, any electrical that I did up until that point, I'd always turn the electricity off to do it, you know. Of course, you make sure you do your homework and that you are aware of what you're doing. But in this case, I was forced to work on live electricity on a regular basis, right from probably the second or third day on the job, where I was required to change the fans, I believe it was, on the roof, for the ventilation system, and I was required to work on live electricity, which was 240 volts. But in this case, working on this changing the ballast. I was changing the ballast in the bathroom. So I was up in the ceiling. So I was up to my waist. The ceiling was at about waist level, and I was up above the ceiling, 10-foot ceiling in the bathroom. And but even before this incident happened, on that same day, bearing in mind, you know, I'm on 3-month probation as a new employee, so you try not to buck the system, and you try to kind of do as I'm told and go along, go with the flow and so forth. Anyway, I was 3 days away from becoming a supervisor, because I was three days away from my 3-month probationary period coming to an end, at which point I was going to be supposed to be promoted to supervisor. But on this particular day, in that same bathroom where this incident occurred, I was tasked with changing the ballast for fluorescent lighting in that bathroom, which required me to remove wires and then remove the ballast and then replace the wires. Well, the supervisor had come to the conclusion that he couldn't find the electrical panel to shut off the breaker. Of course, I expressed concern about that. I said, well, I'm going to be working on live electricity, 240 volts, and apparently when you're dealing with ballast, that boosts the voltage, doubles the voltage, which means we're talking about 440 volts. And sure enough, I was changing the ballast when one of the wires touched and zapped the tool right out of my hand, and it was sent flying clean across this long bathroom at lightning speed, and it just went right by my face. So this is a kind of thing that I was dealt with for the 3 months that I worked there. I dealt with similar issues, similar situations of danger on a regular basis, endangering my safety, endangering my life in this case. And so after that was zapped, I went to the supervisor and I said, I just about got my face taken off by the pair of pliers I was holding when I got zapped by the wire connected to this ballast. And he laughed. He just laughed his head off. He said, well, you took the wrong wire off. You should have taken the ground off. I said, well, you didn't explain that to me. I'm not an electrician. Anyway, so at that point I says, I'm not going to change anything until that electricity is shut off. He says, well, I can't find the breaker panel. He says, I'll cut the wire in the ceiling. Well, I knew where he had cut the wire in the ceiling, and because the ceiling tile was removed, so after changing the ballast, I had to go reconnect the wire, and it was dark, and all I had was a flashlight. So I was going up the ladder, and once I was inside the cavity between the ceiling tiles and the floor, let's say, I didn't realize that the live wire was dangling above my head. So that's when it struck me through my head, and so it caused a lot of damage to me, and because according to neurologists, it fried the nerve sensors at the base of the skull. Apparently there's 3 nerve sensors at the base of the skull, and they were damaged to the point where I developed a condition that's similar to epilepsy in the nighttime. About 3 days after the incident, I would get major twitches at night where my head would snap back at lightning speed, or my head would go side to side like this at lightning speed, and I would get whiplash. And the first time it happened, it probably, well, I was still recovering from whiplash from the incident, but the whiplash was so severe that I think it was almost 3 years before I could actually look to the right. I could only look to the left. So, yeah, that was all in one day. That all happened in one day. So, you know, there was a close call, which should have been an eye-opener there, and then trying to reconnect the wires in the pitch black, you know. And this is what happened. But it was negligence on the part of the supervisor, and it was deliberate.
And why do you think he would put your safety at risk? Tell us.
Well, it was part of his aim to discredit me as a maintenance worker with skills, and I did have skills. I've been doing this kind of stuff for quite some time, but just prior to my arrival there, he had tried to get his 19-year-old son to become the supervisor, and it was rejected by the other maintenance workers because, some of those maintenance workers had a lot more experience than his son, and his son was rather immature, frankly, and they were quite insulted that he was being considered as a supervisor, and so in retrospect, I sort of can piece all this together and realize, well, his whole intent was to hire me and see if he could prove to the manager, well, there you go, I hired a fella and he wasn't able to do the job, he didn't have the skills, he didn't have the competence, so I think it's time we make my son supervisor. So I think that's how things.
Okay.